Hello, hello, hello. Testing, testing, testing. Last week or last video I did, sorry, I was typing there. In the last video I did, I talked about two things. The two interesting things I found in a company's financial reports, and also that one I showed you my preliminary analysis checklist, and one of the criteria I talk about is rising book value over time. I forgot to tell you that there's a caveat to that book value rising over time. Today I want to tell you that because it's super important, but it's in the next step of my process. So my process, to kind of recap, when I'm going through a company, I find a company, or I search through lists, I find a company, I do a visual preliminary analysis checklist to kind of screen the terrible companies fast. Then I do my full preliminary analysis checklist that I showed you the other day. Write everything down, do everything by hand. After that, then I start reading financial reports. Then I do other research, like researching on Google, comparing companies to competitors, like I showed last time. So this process that we talked about last time was the kind of first two steps. Now I'm going to go to the third step, where I actually get into the price or the book value per share, and the one caveat to that. So in the last video, I said that pretty much you always want to see book value going up over time. Book value is a very conservative proxy for value investors on the kind of base level intrinsic value of the company. Doesn't include operations, just focus on the balance sheet. And as value investors, most of us focus on the balance sheet either first or mostly, depending on how conservative we are. But that doesn't include the operations of the company, the cash flow of the company. That's why it's such a conservative valuation. You almost always want to see this going up over time. There's a caveat to that, though. So, and that's what I want to show you today with a random company. So I'm going to bring up a random company's financials. And I'm going to show you the caveat. So this is a company I went through earlier, and their financials were not great. They weren't bad. They were kind of eh. But I want to show you here is, and let me bring this up, then I'll share my screen with you. Okay. It's going slow. There we are. Okay, so again, hopefully you can see this screen. If you're wanting to ask any questions during this or after this, if we do a Q&A session, make sure to write it in the comments, and I'm going to check on my phone right now, get it up on my phone if there's any questions, so I will know if you have any questions. Okay, so the one caveat to book value always rising is down here in goodwill and intangible assets. So you pretty much, again, always want to see book value going up. This is the one time you don't want to see it going up. If it's due in large part to the company increasing goodwill and intangible assets. Goodwill, I have several blog posts and videos where I talk about why I don't like goodwill. 99% of the time it's useless. The only time goodwill adds any value to the company is if the company has long-term extreme competitive advantages. Think like Coca-Cola. That's the only time goodwill adds even a decent amount of value to the company's balance sheet and book value in real world economic sense. Goodwill in most cases is just an accounting terminology for the price that a company paid in excess of the value of the company's book value. So if the company has a book value of $1 million and the company gets acquired, or the company that acquires and buys this other company pays $3 million, there would be a $2 million charge or asset included on the company's balance sheet for the difference. The goodwill pretty much, other than if you're acquiring companies that have competitive advantage, or you or yourself have competitive advantages or stuff like that, goodwill is pretty much always worthless. When I do a reproduction valuation, I almost 100% of the time write goodwill down to zero. Again, because I don't focus on large companies with with sustained competitive advantages. I focus on smaller companies, and most smaller companies do not have competitive advantages. So goodwill 99% of the time is useless. Intangible assets is a different story. Intangible assets are things like trademarks, patents, customer lists, brand names, trademarks, stuff like that. These typically can and do have more value for the company. But again, unless these are huge brand names, unless these are huge trademarks, whenever I talk to somebody about this, a student about this or whatever, I bring up Marlboro, the brand, Coca-Cola, what else? See, off the top of my head, I'm struggling to think of companies that I would consider brand names, huge brand names, Apple, Google. They need to be world-spanning brand names, trademarks to have any value when it comes to adding value in terms of intrinsic value and book value to the company. Patents are a different story. If you have a patent and you have 10-year exclusivity, that's a big deal. But you also need to watch out when the patents expire, because they expire. So most of the time, if you see goodwill and intangible assets going up a lot more than kind of the regular assets of the company, or the harder assets, I guess would probably be a better term, and the book value per share is going up, you need to be careful about that. So what I usually do when I get to the second or third stage of my analysis process to make sure that's not an issue is I use net tangible book value. So I take out things like goodwill and intangible assets. Again, I do not invest most of the time in companies with large competitive advantages, valuable trademarks, valuable patents, stuff like that. I focus on smaller companies that don't have these things. So almost 100% of the time I take those out. So I use net tangible book value instead. Again, the only thing that's taken out of here is goodwill and intangible assets. The rest of the book value remains the same. So if net tangible book value is rising over time, that's a good sign. If it's not, then you know that goodwill and intangible assets are adding most of the value here with the rising book value. And again, unless you're looking at a world-spanning, market-dominating company, that's not adding real economic value to the company, in my opinion. This is the only caveat to, and I'm checking the messages right now, this is the only caveat to when book value rises. In my opinion, this is a large one, but it's pretty much the only one with rising book value over time. With all of these rules I'm going to talk about I've been talking about for years on the blog, and have been talking about, or I'm going to talk about as we go further in this coronavirus stuff, and we're all stuck at home, is a lot of the stuff I share with students and stuff that frankly a lot of people don't talk about. I want to give you as much information as possible so you can gain a huge advantage over other investors. So in these sessions, some will be short, some will be long. We're going to start up live weekly sessions this weekend, hopefully. So I'll post about that in the Facebook group as well, and on the blog, and on other social media, and on our email list. So if you're on any of those and you want to join our free weekly training, that will be on a Zoom. All you have to do is download the Zoom app. It's free. I have to pay for it so I can have more people in Zoom rooms, but it's free for you. And all you have to do is join and you can ask questions. We're going to go over live preliminary analysis of companies. Depending on how many people show up, I might actually let a few people recommend companies for us to do a preliminary analysis of as well. So if you're interested in that, in evaluating a company of your recommendation, and again, I've done these sessions with students for years, and I'll answer any questions you have as long as we don't go over a huge amount of time. I mean, if you ask my students, we sometimes plan for an hour and we go for 2.5 hours. So I'm not planning on that again, unless we get into a huge, in-depth, fantastic discussion. But if you want to join that session, that will be free. And we're going to keep doing these kind of live sessions as well to help you talk about some of the more obscure things in value investing that, again, most people don't talk about, but you can get a huge advantage knowing what something means, even though it's not necessarily talked about a lot. So if you have any questions about anything right now, again, this is coronavirus. I'm checking stuff right now. This is coronavirus. This is retirement funds. This is portfolio stuff. This is anything we talked about in the video. If you have any questions right now, I'm going to stay on for a little bit and we can talk about them. Again, I'm trying to check the post right here. It's taking forever to get to it. Not sure where the post went. I'm trying to see if there's any comments. And we can talk about them. Again, I'm trying to check the post. Okay, so I'm going to pause that. So again, if you have any comments, questions, want to know about anything, retirement funds, thoughts on the coronavirus, if you just want to hang out and talk about value investing stuff, let me know in the comments below. But if nobody answers or nobody asks a question here pretty quick, I'm going to get off because I just don't want to yammer here for you either. So, okay, so that's the other video. Okay, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for now. So this is pretty straightforward. Again, some of the other videos we're going to talk about are more in depth, or some of the other things we're going to talk about are more in depth, more kind of nuanced. This is relatively straightforward, but it's, again, you can get, by knowing this small kind of nuance, you could save yourself a lot of trouble, or potential trouble, by noticing if a company is increasing their book value from here to here, but it's mainly in goodwill and intangible assets. It's probably not a good thing unless you're looking at somebody like Disney or Intel or some of the other companies I mentioned. If it's in harder assets like accounts receivable, inventory, net PP&E, stuff like that, cash would be even better. Those are generally good things. Again, there's caveats when it comes to accounts receivable and inventory. You don't want those to be out of whack either. But those are still better than goodwill and intangible assets for smaller companies, in my opinion. So I'm going to give one last check here. Got some stuff, let me know in the comments below. One last check, reset my Facebook. If not, I'm going to get off. And again, we'll keep doing these video sessions. I'm going to try to do them at a regularly scheduled time, but I have kids and family stuff, so that's not always possible. But I'm going to try to do these at kind of a semi-regular time. Check here. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions. Again, we're going to do these. Let me know your comments, questions, concerns, and we'll talk about all this kind of stuff. We're going to all have a lot of free time, it sounds like, over the next couple months. So if you want to learn anything about value investing, finance, coronavirus stuff, retirement funds, specific terminology, any of that kind of stuff, let me know, and we can talk about it in a future session. Until then, we're going to start back up our masterclass and our coaching program. Now that I'm back researching constantly stocks again, I'm going to have a lot of stuff to teach about. We're going to be creating a ton of content for you outside of those programs, but those are our main 2 programs. If you want to invest in those, check out the other video in our link, which the other video should be below this. After this is posted on the Facebook group, and we look forward to having you. We're going to do live sessions again, specifically or exclusive to paying students of the masterclass and the coaching program. These other sessions that I was talking about earlier, these are going to be free ones. We're still going to give a ton of value, but you're not going to be able to pick and choose kind of what we talk about. In those sessions, students literally, if you want to go over a company or you want to learn something specific, we'll set up an entire session for that. So I hope this helped. I hope you learned a lot. I'm going to check one more time. All right, reset my Facebook on my phone one more time. All right, still nothing on my end. So until next time, we'll talk to you again soon. Have a great day.